The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with their usual hiss. Representatives from 47 different species filed into their assigned seats, their various forms creating a colorful display across the curved amphitheater. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few rolled into position on mechanical supports. Chairman Zethkar adjusted his ceremonial robes and looked out over the assembly. His four eyes scanned the familiar arrangement of delegates, but something felt wrong. The Vrexian leader's gaze stopped at a particular section near the front of the chamber. The human delegation seats sat empty. Where are the Terrans? Asked Counselor Yuthara, her tentacles twitching with nervous energy. The Theshan diplomat had worked closely with the human representatives for over a decade. Zethkar waved one of his massive arms dismissively, probably dealing with another one of their moral crusades. You know how they are, always finding problems where none exist. The other delegates murmured agreement. The humans had a reputation for being difficult. They asked too many questions about military actions. They insisted on investigating every complaint about civilian casualties. They demanded evidence before approving any military aid to member worlds. We can proceed without them, announced the chairman. The vote on the Zephyrian Expansion Initiative will continue as planned. But as the session progressed, more representatives began to notice the absence. The humans never missed important votes. They were annoyingly reliable in that way. Always present, always prepared, always asking uncomfortable questions about ethics and rules of war. 3 sessions passed. The human seats remained empty. Across the galaxy, something unprecedented was happening. On every human colony, from the industrial centers of Alpha Centauri to the farming worlds of the Vega system, the same scene played out. Families packed their belongings with quiet efficiency. Children were told they were going on a long trip. No one explained where or why. Dr. Yuthara stood on the observation deck of the Theshan research station orbiting Kepler 442b. Below her, the human settlement was emptying. Transport ships landed and departed in careful coordination. Each vessel carried hundreds of people and thousands of pounds of equipment. Her longtime research partner, Dr. Sarah Chan, walked up beside her. The human woman's face showed strain that Yuthara had never seen before. Sarah, what is happening? Where is everyone going? Yuthara's translator rendered her emotional distress clearly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She watched another transport lift off from the colony below. We're leaving, yo. All of us. But why? The research here is going so well. We're close to a breakthrough with the cancer treatment. I know. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry we couldn't finish it together. Yuthara felt panic rising in her chest. This makes no sense. Humans don't abandon projects. You never give up. It's one of your most annoying traits. A sad smile crossed Sarah's face. We're not giving up. We're preparing. Preparing for what? But Sarah was already walking away. She stopped at the airlock door and turned back. Y'all, I want you to know that working with you has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Your people have so much potential. I hope you'll remember that in the coming years. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going to happen? The human scientist's eyes were filled with tears. The universe is about to remember why we volunteered to be its guardians. We're sorry we failed you. The airlock sealed behind her, leaving Yuthara alone on the observation deck. Similar scenes played out across human space. On military bases, human officers quietly transferred command to local forces. They left detailed operational manuals and weapons caches, but took all their advanced technology. Every piece of equipment they had developed themselves disappeared into their cargo holds. The evacuation was so organized that many alien governments didn't notice at first. Human administrators simply stopped showing up for work. Human merchants closed their shops. Human teachers didn't return to their classrooms, but they caused no trouble, damaged no property, and left no angry messages. They simply vanished. Admiral Korath of the Altarian Defense Force watched the last human naval vessel leave Altarian space. The humans had maintained a patrol presence in the sector for 30 years, helping to keep pirate attacks to minimum levels. Now the ships were gone. Should we follow them? Asked his aide. Where would we follow them to? Korath replied. They're not heading to any known human system. Their flight path takes them toward the galactic rim. Why would they go there? There's nothing out there but empty space. Admiral Korath had no answer. On the frontier worlds, the evacuation was most noticeable. Human colonies had often been the only source of medical care, education, or technical support for entire sectors. Now that infrastructure was being carefully dismantled and packed away, Governor Telfax of the Rigel colony received a formal message from the human administrators. They were transferring all civil authority to local governments and departing within the week. The message included detailed instructions for maintaining the water, purification systems, and power. Grids the humans had built. What it didn't include was any explanation for why they were leaving. The strangest part was the children. Every human child, from infants to teenagers, was being evacuated. No exceptions. Even children who had been born on alien worlds and had never seen Earth were being taken away. This detail troubled many alien observers more than anything else. Humans were known for their fierce protection of their young. If they were taking all their children away, they must believe something terrible was coming. But what could threaten the entire galaxy? Back on the research station, Dr. Yulthara found a datapad on her desk. Sarah had left it for her. Most of the files were encrypted, but one folder was accessible. It contained their joint research on cancer treatments, but also something else. Hidden within the medical files were astronomical charts, star maps showing movement patterns in the void between galaxies. Something massive was moving toward their galaxy, and the humans had been tracking it for years. The final file contained a personal message from Sarah. You use the medical research to help our people. But please, look at the star charts. We tried to warn the council, but they wouldn't listen. Maybe you can make them understand. The children had to be protected. That was always our first priority. I hope someday you'll forgive us for leaving you behind. As Yulthara studied the astronomical data, a chill ran through her entire body. The humans hadn't been abandoning their responsibilities. They had been preparing for something that was already on its way. 6 months had passed since the humans disappeared. The galaxy was learning to function without them. Though not everyone was happy with the changes. Emperor Vashtar of the Zephyrian Empire stood before his war council, his scaled hands gripping the edge of a tactical display. The holographic map showed the border between Zephyrian and Altarian space, where his armies had been gathering for weeks. The human observers are gone, he announced to his generals. Their patrol ships no longer police our borders. Their diplomatic missions have been abandoned. Now we can finally deal with the Altarian threat properly. General Kethver, an older Zephyrian with battle scars across his face, shifted uncomfortably. My lord, the humans always insisted that the Altarians pose no real threat to us. Their military forces are primarily defensive. The humans were weak, Vashtar snarled. They infected our thinking with their ridiculous concepts about proportional response and civilian protection. A true warrior strikes first and strikes hard. The Emperor's fingers stabbed at several Altarian civilian centers on the map. We will launch a preemptive attack. Gas weapons should clear out these population centers quickly. Then we can claim their resource worlds without resistance. General Kethver's eyes widened. Sir, nerve gas against civilians? The Geneva Conventions that the humans helped establish specifically prohibit. The humans are gone. Vashtar roared. Their laws died with their departure. We are Zephyrians. We follow Zephyrian law. 3 days later, the attack began. Zephyrian warships dropped canisters of Zelfec nerve gas over 5 Altarian cities. The gas was designed to kill quickly, but leave infrastructure intact. Within hours, over 2 million Altarian civilians were dead. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Chairman Zethkar called for order as delegates shouted accusations and demands across the chamber. The Altarian representative wept openly as he displayed images of the dead cities. This is an unprecedented violation of galactic law, declared Councillor Ythara. The chemical weapons treaties clearly state. Treaties enforced by whom? Interrupted the Zephyrian delegate. The humans who wrote those treaties have abandoned us. Why should we be bound by the laws of ghosts? Zethkar pounded his gavel repeatedly. The Council condemns these attacks and demands immediate reparations. Or what? The Zephyrian representative stood up boldly. Will you send strongly worded letters? Will you impose trade sanctions? Who will enforce your judgment when my emperor refuses to comply? A terrible silence fell over the chamber. For decades, everyone had understood that human ships would appear to enforce council decisions. Human marines would arrest war criminals. Human fleets would blockade aggressive nations. But the humans were gone. The Zephyrian delegate smiled coldly. I thought so. The age of human interference is over. Now the strong will rule, as nature intended. As news of the Zephyrian attack spread, other aggressive species began making their own plans. The Krex hegemony announced they were annexing 3 neutral worlds that had been under human protection. The Bloodscale pirates launched raids against merchant convoys that had previously been safe under human patrol. Admiral Koreth received the distress calls in his command center. 17 merchant ships had been attacked in the past week alone. The pirates were using new tactics, targeting medical transports and food convoys that carried supplies to refugee worlds. Sir, the merchant captain on Channel 7 is requesting immediate assistance, reported his communications officer. The pirates have taken their medical cargo and are threatening to execute the crew. Koreth stared at the tactical display. His ships were already spread thin, trying to cover territories that human patrols had previously protected. How long until our nearest vessel can reach them? 4 hours, sir. The crew will be dead in 1 hour. The pirates know we can't reach them in time. This was the calculation the pirates had made. Without human ships providing rapid response coverage, vast areas of space had become lawless zones. The carefully maintained peace that had lasted for decades was crumbling. Dr. Yulthar worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to understand the data Sarah had left behind. The star charts were complex, but she was beginning to see patterns. Something was definitely moving toward their galaxy from the void. Between star systems. Her research was interrupted by an emergency broadcast from the Theshan government. 3 Theshan research colonies had gone silent in the past month. When rescue ships arrived, they found the stations completely abandoned. No signs of struggle, no distress signals, just empty facilities with all the researchers missing. It's like they just vanished, reported Captain Healthies from the rescue vessel. But there's something else. The local wildlife has gone crazy. Peaceful herbivores are attacking anything that moves. Predators that usually avoid settlements are gathering in large packs. Yulthara felt ice in her veins. According to Sarah's notes, animal behavior changes were one of the first warning signs mentioned in the ancient texts. The humans had discovered. She opened a secure communication channel to her government. I need to speak with the Science Ministry immediately. I have information about why the humans left. The response came back within hours. Dr. Yulthara, the ministry is too busy dealing with the refugee crisis to investigate conspiracy theories about human motivations. This isn't a conspiracy theory. I have data showing the humans abandoned us, Doctor. That's all we need to know. Focus on your medical research instead of chasing mysteries. The communication channel closed, leaving Yulthara alone with her growing fear. Meanwhile, reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy. Entire systems were reporting equipment failures and communication blackouts. Trade routes that had been stable for centuries were becoming dangerous as pirate activity increased by 300%. The Altarian Defense Force, still reeling from the Zephyrian gas attack, issued a desperate plea for assistance. We need medical supplies for the survivors and protection for our remaining cities. The humans always responded to requests for humanitarian aid. Will no one take their place? But every species was dealing with their own problems. Without human coordination, the various galactic governments couldn't organize effective responses to crises. They had grown dependent on human logistics, human medicine, and human peacekeeping. Governor Talthax of Rigel Colony sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council. Our situation is becoming critical. Without human technical support, our power grid is failing. Without human medical supplies, disease is spreading among the refugees. Without human patrol ships, pirates attack our supply convoys daily. How long can this continue? The answer came not from the Council, but from Dr. Yulthara's private research. Hidden in Sarah's files, she found a fragment of an ancient transmission. The message was millions of years old, translated by human xenorchaeologists from ruins on dead worlds. When the Watchers depart, the harvest begins. Every civilization believes they are the first to reach for the stars. None realize they are simply crops, growing in a carefully tended garden, waiting for the reapers to return. Yulthara's hand shook as she read the translation. The humans hadn't abandoned them out of anger or frustration. They had been the Watchers mentioned in the message, and their departure meant something terrible was coming to harvest the galaxy. She looked out her laboratory window at the stars, wondering if any of them had already gone dark while she wasn't watching. Dr. Kethmorrow brushed ancient dust from the stone tablets with careful precision. The xenorchaeologist had spent 3 months excavating the ruins on KX-739, a dead world at the edge of the galaxy. What he was finding challenged everything he thought he knew about galactic history. The ruins were old, older than any civilization in the Council records. The quantum dating showed they were at least 4 million years ancient, built by a species that had died out before the galaxy's current powers had even evolved intelligence. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was what the ruins depicted. Keth Morrell activated his translation matrix and began recording his findings. Personal log, day 94. The pictographs are becoming clearer as I clean them. The story they tell is troubling. The wall before him showed carved images of a galaxy full of life. Hundreds of species reaching toward the stars, building cities, creating art and music and literature. A golden age of peace and prosperity. Then came the next panel. Dark shapes emerged from the void between galaxies. Massive forms that seemed to be part machine, part living creature. They moved through space without ships, folding reality around themselves to travel impossible distances. The entities appeared to harvest entire civilizations, Kethmorrow recorded. They don't just destroy, they consume. Technology, biology, culture. Everything is absorbed and incorporated into their forms. The third panel showed the aftermath. Empty worlds orbiting dead stars. The galaxy stripped of all advanced life, waiting for evolution to begin again. But the fourth panel was different. It showed small groups of survivors from the harvest, teaching younger species about the coming danger, passing down knowledge, preparing defenses, training guardians to watch for the signs of the next cycle. Cathmoral's hands trembled as he translated the ancient text beneath the images. "We have failed our watch. The Devourers return in the time of our descendants. We leave this warning for those who will come after. Teach the young races to be vigilant. Train them to be guardians. When they depart, know that the harvest approaches." The final panel showed a promise. One species would be chosen in each cycle to serve as watchers. They would be given knowledge and purpose. They would monitor, prepare, and protect. And when the time came, they would gather the worthy and flee to safety, leaving the proud and foolish to face their fate. Cathmoral sat back on his heels, staring at the ancient warning. The humans had been the watchers for this cycle. His communication equipment crackled to life. Static-filled reports were coming in from observation posts across the galaxy. Deep space monitors were detecting gravitational anomalies in the void between galaxies. Things that shouldn't exist were moving in the darkness. "All stations, this is Deep Space Monitor 7, came a panicked voice through the static. "I'm reading massive gravitational disturbances in Sector 449, whatever's causing them. It's bigger than a star system." Cathmoral transmitted his findings immediately to the Galactic Council, but received an automated response. The Council is currently dealing with multiple humanitarian crises and cannot review archaeological reports at this time. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the situation continued to deteriorate. The Zephyrian Empire had moved beyond their initial attack on the Altarians. Emperor Vashtar declared a holy war of expansion and began systematically conquering neighboring systems. Without human intervention, 3 peaceful species had already been enslaved. Pirate fleets grew bolder by the day. The Bloodscale Raiders had captured an entire trade network, demanding tribute from any ship that wanted to pass through what had previously been the safest shipping lanes in the galaxy. But worse than the war and piracy were the disappearances. Entire colonies were going silent without explanation. Not destroyed, simply empty. Rescue teams would arrive to find empty cities with no signs of struggle. Food still on tables, vehicles still running, but no people anywhere. Dr. Yulthara had documented 17 such incidents in the past month. Each one followed the same pattern. First, the local animals would go crazy, then all communication would stop. Then rescue teams would find ghost towns. She was comparing the locations of the disappearances when her laboratory door chimed. A Theshan military officer entered, his uniform bearing the insignia of Deep Space Command. "Doctor, I'm Commander Velther. I understand you've been studying human data about unusual astronomical phenomena." Yulthara nodded carefully. "Yes, but my government told me to focus on medical research." The government was wrong. Velther activated a portable holographic display. "We've been monitoring deep space. Something is out there, Doctor. Something big enough to bend light around itself." The hologram showed the galaxy from above, with red markers indicating the locations of the mysterious disappearances. They formed a pattern, a spiral starting from the galactic edge and moving inward. "It's not random," Yulthara realized. "They're being taken in order from the outside in." Taken by what? Yulthara pulled up Sarah's data files. According to human research, by entities called harvesters. They've been doing this for millions of years, harvesting civilizations when they reach a certain level of development. Commander Velther stared at the data in horror. How did the humans know this? They found ancient warnings, just like Dr. Cathmoral did on KX-739, but they found them centuries ago. They've been preparing for this their entire civilization. The commander's communication device beeped urgently. He answered with a grim expression that grew worse as he listened. "Doctor, I need you to come with me immediately. The Council has finally authorized an expedition to Earth. We need someone who can interpret human data files. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks through the abandoned jump gates that humans had maintained for centuries. The gates still worked perfectly, but they felt like traveling through a graveyard. Earth looked exactly as the humans had left it. The cities were intact but empty, with automated systems still maintaining basic functions. Parks were overgrown, but not destroyed. It was as if millions of people had simply stepped outside for a walk and never returned. The expedition team found what they were looking for at the Arecibo Memorial Observatory, a massive installation on the dark side of the moon. The facility was still operational. Its enormous array of sensors pointed toward the void between galaxies. Dr. Yulthara accessed the final logs with Sarah's authorization codes. The last entry, recorded by Dr. Marcus Webb 3 days before the evacuation, contained only 18 words. They're coming. Estimated arrival in 2 years. May God forgive us for leaving you unprepared. The children had to be saved. Attached to the log were detailed sensor readings showing the approach of objects that defied conventional physics. Ships, if they could be called ships, that moved faster than light, without using any known technology. The final file contained coordinates for a location beyond the galactic rim. Labeled New Eden Project. The humans hadn't fled randomly. They had a destination, a plan, a purpose. Commander Velther stood next to her as they reviewed the data. Doctor, how long do we have? Yulthara calculated the movement patterns against the current date. Her answer came out as a whisper. 6 months. Maybe less. Outside the observatory, Earth's automated systems continued their lonely vigil. The planet waited in silence, a monument to a species that had tried to save the galaxy and been ignored. Soon, Yulthara realized Earth would be all that remained of billions of years of galactic civilization. Unless someone could convince the feuding species to stop fighting each other and start preparing for the real enemy. The enemy that was already much closer than anyone imagined. The first harvester ship emerged from the void like a nightmare made real. Admiral Korath watched in horror from the bridge of his flagship as sensors struggled to make sense of what they were detecting. The entity was massive, larger than the moon that orbited his homeworld. Its hull seemed to be made of metal and bone fused together, with organic growths that pulsed with sickly light. Sir, it's not using any drive system we can identify, reported his sensor operator, voice shaking. It's just folding space around itself, moving by bending reality. All ships, attack formation, Korath commanded. The combined fleet of the Altarian Defense Force moved toward the intruder, 47 vessels, representing the best military technology there civilization could produce. The harvester didn't seem to notice them at first. It was busy with something else. Massive tendrils extended from its hull toward the nearby mining colony on Altai 7, but these weren't weapons. They were feeding tubes. As the horrified fleet watched, the tendrils penetrated the colony's protective dome. Instead of air rushing out, something rushed in. The colonists were pulled from their homes, their bodies dissolving into streams of energy that flowed back into the harvester ship. But worse than the people were the buildings. The metal and concrete and plastic of the colony began to flow like liquid, reshaping itself and merging with the harvester's hull. The technology, the art, the culture, everything was being absorbed and incorporated. Open fire! Admiral Korath shouted. 40-7 ships unleashed their full arsenals against the harvester. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and fusion missiles struck its hull with enough force to shatter a mountain. The explosions lit up space like miniature suns. When the light faded, the harvester was completely undamaged. Worse, it had grown larger. The energy from their weapons had been absorbed just like everything else. The alien entity finally turned its attention to the fleet. What happened next would haunt the few survivors for the rest of their short lives. The harvester didn't fire weapons. Instead, it sang, a sound that no living being was meant to hear echoed through space and somehow penetrated the hulls of every ship. The crew members began to scream as their own bodies turned against them. Their technology started to reshape itself, becoming part of something else. Admiral Korath felt his uniform melting into his skin as his ship was consumed around him. His last coherent thought was a desperate wish that someone would warn the rest of the galaxy about what was coming. But warning the galaxy had become impossible. The Galactic Council chambers were in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations at each other, while Emperor Vashtar's holographic image laughed from the main display screen. "You fools still don't understand," the Zephyrian ruler declared. "I have 15 systems under my control now. My armies grow stronger with each conquest. Soon I will rule this entire sector." Chairman Zethkar pounded his gavel uselessly. "The Council demands that you cease these aggressive actions immediately." "The Council can demand whatever it wishes," Vashtar replied. "Who will enforce your demands? The humans who ran away like cowards?" What none of them knew was that Vashtar's empire had already been consumed. The being speaking to them was no longer truly Zephyrian. The harvesters had taken the Emperor's form and knowledge, using his identity to keep the other species fighting among themselves. Dr. Yulthara sat in her laboratory, frantically trying to decode more of the human data files. She had managed to access Sarah's emergency protocols, and what she found terrified her. The files contained detailed tactical assessments of every major galactic power. The humans had studied each species' military capabilities, political structures, and psychological weaknesses, not to conquer them, but to understand how they would react when the harvesters arrived. The assessments were brutally accurate. Zephyrian Empire will immediately launch aggressive expansion when human oversight is removed. High probability of civil wars, weakening military response capability. Altarian Defense Force, well-trained but dependent on human logistical support, will attempt direct confrontation with harvesters and be eliminated within first contact. Deshan Science Council will prioritize research over military preparation, will understand the threat too late to mount effective resistance. Council government will collapse into factional disputes when faced with existential crisis. Members will pursue individual survival over collective defense. Every prediction was coming true. The human files also contained something else. Automated beacon systems hidden throughout the galaxy. As Yulthara watched, her sensors detected the beacons activating one by one. Each signal meant the same thing. Another system had fallen to the harvesters. The pattern of consumption was becoming clear. The harvesters moved from system to system in careful order, taking time to fully digest each civilization before moving to the next. They weren't just destroying, they were learning. Each absorbed species made them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. They were incorporating the military tactics of every conquered fleet, the scientific knowledge of every consumed research station, the cultural understanding of every harvested world. Dr. Kethmoral's archaeological team had evacuated to the Deshan homeworld, bringing with them complete translations of the ancient warnings. The records spoke of previous harvests, previous cycles of civilization and destruction. "The Devourers learn from every harvest," he reported to the Science Council. "They become more efficient each time. Previous civilizations have faced them with magic, with technology, with unity, with individualism. Nothing has worked. They adapt to every strategy." "Then, what did the ancient writers suggest?" asked Chief Scientist Helmara. Kethmoral pointed to the final panel of the ancient pictographs. "Escape. The only survival strategy is to run far enough and hide long enough for them to complete their harvest and return to the void. Those who fight are consumed. Those who hide might live to rebuild. That's what the humans did, Yulthara realized. They didn't abandon us out of cowardice. They saved who they could and left the rest to make their own choice. Fight and die. Or learn and survive. But it was becoming clear that most of the galaxy had chosen to fight. The desperate transmission came from deep. Space Monitor 4. This is Commander Jalthis reporting final contact. We have visual on 17 harvester entities approaching the Rigel sector. They're singing again. The song is beautiful. I want to go to them. I want to become part of. The transmission cut off. Governor Telthax evacuated Rigel colony with only hours to spare. His transport ship joined a growing fleet of refugees fleeing toward the galactic core. But even there, they weren't safe. The harvesters had changed their pattern. Instead of moving system by system, they had split up. Multiple harvesting fleets now swept through the galaxy simultaneously, approaching from different directions. How many ships are we detecting? Asked Captain Healthies of the refugee vessel Salvation. 47 separate entities, reported the sensor operator. But sir, they're not just ships anymore. Some of them look like they've incorporated entire space stations. Others have grown organic structures that match no known biology. And the largest one, what about it? It's shaped like a combination of Zephyrian, Altarian, and Rigelian architecture. It's using the cultures it consumed to rebuild itself. The horrific truth was becoming clear. The harvesters weren't just consuming civilizations, they were becoming them. Each absorbed species became part of their collective consciousness. Their knowledge and abilities added to the growing intelligence that guided the harvest. Dr. Yulthara made a final, desperate transmission to anyone who might be listening. This is Dr. Yulthara of the Theshan Science Council. If anyone receives this message, you need to understand. The humans tried to save us. They left behind hidden supply caches and automated defense grids in their old systems. The access codes are in this transmission. She attached Sarah's authorization files to the broadcast and sent it on all emergency frequencies. The humans knew we wouldn't listen. They knew we'd fight among ourselves instead of preparing. But they still left us tools to survive if we're smart enough to use them. Find the human systems. The automated defenses might buy us time. As she finished the transmission, alarms began screaming throughout her laboratory. The harvesters had reached the Shen space. Through her window, she could see stars going dark one by one as the harvest consumed everything in its path. Soon, it would be her turn to choose fight and be consumed, or run and hope to find sanctuary in whatever refuge the humans had prepared. The galaxy that had existed for millions of years was ending. The only question now was whether anything would remain to remember it. 1 year after the harvest began, the galaxy was dying. Dr. Yulthara floated in zero gravity aboard the refugee ship Sanctuary, one of the last vessels to escape the destruction of the Theshan homeworld. Around her, representatives of 17 different species worked desperately to maintain life support systems that were never designed for such a diverse population. 3/4 of council space was gone. The harvesters had consumed entire sectors, leaving behind only empty space where civilizations had once thrived. The survivors numbered in the millions, instead of the billions that had once populated the galaxy. But they were alive because of something the humans had left behind. Dr. Yulthara. To the command deck, announced Captain Healthies over the ship's communication system. We're approaching the Sol system. You need to see this. Yulthara pulled herself through the ship's corridors to the main view screen. What she saw there defied belief. Earth's solar system had been transformed into a fortress. Massive, automated defense platforms orbited every planet. Their weapons powered by technology that seemed decades ahead of anything she remembered. Artificial intelligence systems guided patrol ships that moved with impossible precision. The entire system pulsed with energy shields that made space itself shimmer. The human automated systems activated when we entered the system, reported the ship's communications officer. They're welcoming us. In 17 different languages. The voice that came through the speakers was artificially generated, but somehow warm and familiar. Welcome to the Soul Sanctuary. This system has been prepared for the survivors of the Galactic Harvest. Please proceed to Luna Station for processing and assignment to habitat modules. Luna Station was a marvel of engineering that hadn't existed when the humans departed. It was a massive ring-shaped structure that encircled Earth's moon, with docking bays large enough to accommodate ships from every species in the galaxy. As refugee ships arrived, they were greeted by holographic avatars of humans who had died decades earlier, but had uploaded their consciousness to serve as guides. Dr. Sarah Chen's image appeared on Yulthara's screen, looking exactly as she had the day she departed. "Hello, old friend," the hologram said with a sad smile. "I wish we were meeting again under better circumstances." Yulthara felt tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, is it really you?" "In a way. I'm a copy of Dr. Chun's memories and personality, created to help guide survivors through the sanctuary protocols. The real Sarah is elsewhere, preparing for what comes next." "What comes next?" But before the hologram could answer, alarms began sounding throughout Luna Station. The deep space sensors were detecting something impossible, a massive fleet emerging from the void between galaxies. But these ships were moving toward the galaxy, not away from it. The lead vessel broadcast on all frequencies, using the authorization codes that only one species possessed. The voice that came through was older than Yulthara remembered, but unmistakable. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Exodus Fleet. We are returning to settle our debt. All remaining Council species, prepare for immediate evacuation to designated safe zones. We're going to finish what our predecessors started." Through the view screen, Yulthara watched as humanity's fleet entered the solar system. But these weren't the ships she remembered from before the Exodus. These vessels seemed to exist partially outside normal space, their hulls shifting between solid matter and pure energy. They moved like living things, adapting their shapes as they traveled. The flagship materialized directly beside Luna Station without using any visible docking system. Its hull simply flowed and merged with the station's structure, creating an airlock where none had existed moments before. Admiral Chun walked through the airlock as if stepping between rooms. She looked older, her hair white and her face lined with years of worry. But her eyes burned with determination that Yulthara had never seen before. "Sarah," Yulthara whispered, hardly believing her old friend was really there. "Hello. Y'all, I'm sorry we took so long." Sarah's voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "We had to learn how to kill gods." The explanation came in fragments as the human fleet prepared for battle. During their exile, humanity had made contact with the ancient civilizations that had survived previous harvests. Species that had fled so far into the void that they had learned to exist between dimensions, neither fully alive nor entirely dead. "The harvesters aren't invincible," Sarah explained as she led Yulthara through the flagship's impossible corridors. "But they can't be defeated with conventional weapons. They absorb energy, consume matter, adapt to every strategy. To beat them, we had to become something else." They entered the ship's command center, where Yulthara saw technology that violated every law of physics she knew. Consoles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Crew members whose bodies flickered between states of matter. Weapons that could reach across space and time to strike at targets that hadn't yet decided to exist. "We learned to think like they do," Sarah continued. "To exist in the spaces between reality. We spent 50 years becoming something that could hunt the hunters. The battle began. When the Harvester fleet detected the human presence, Yulthara watched from the flagship's observation deck as impossible forces clashed. In the void around Earth, the Harvesters had grown massive during their year of feeding, some of them the size of small planets. Their hulls incorporating the architecture and biology of dozens of consumed civilizations, but the human ships moved like predators stalking prey. Instead of attacking the Harvesters directly, they slipped between dimensions, striking at the entity's connection to the void between galaxies. Each hit severed another link in the network that connected the Harvester fleet to its source of power. They're not individual ships, Sarah explained as the battle raged around them. They're all part of one massive intelligence that spans the space between galaxies. Cut enough connections, and the intelligence begins to fragment. The largest Harvester, a nightmare fusion of consumed civilizations, turned its attention to the human flagship. Its attack came as that terrible song that had destroyed so many fleets before, but the humans sang back. The sound that emerged from the human ships was different from anything Yulthara had ever heard. It wasn't just music. It was mathematics made audible, physics transformed into harmony. It was the sound of reality being rewritten. Where the Harvester song sought to consume and absorb, the human song did something else entirely. It offered choice. Across the Harvester fleet, the absorbed civilizations that had been incorporated against their will began to remember who they had been. Zephyrian warriors, Altarian defenders, Deshan scientists. Their consciousness began to separate from the collective intelligence that had consumed them. "We're not trying to destroy them," Sarah said softly. "We're trying to free them." The battle lasted 17 hours. When it ended, the Harvester fleet hung silent in space, their hulls splitting apart as the civilizations within them chose to return to individual existence. Ships and stations that had been consumed reformed themselves. People who had been absorbed for months emerged confused but alive. But the war wasn't over. The intelligence behind the harvest still exists, Sarah explained as rescue operations began. It will try again, just as it has for millions of years. But we've changed the rules. The human fleet began to disperse throughout the galaxy, establishing monitoring stations and defense platforms at key locations. But these weren't the same kind of guardians as before. "We're not staying to protect you," Sarah told the assembled survivors. "We're staying to teach you to protect yourselves. The next time the Harvesters return, and they will return, it won't be humanity standing guard. It will be all of us together." Dr. Yulthara stood on Luna Station's observation deck, watching as reconstruction ships departed to rebuild the damaged worlds. The galaxy was wounded but alive. The cycle of harvest and regrowth that had continued for millions of years had finally been broken, not through force or technology alone, but through the most human of qualities, the stubborn refusal to give up on those who had given up on themselves. As she watched the ships disappear into the distance, Yulthara made a personal log entry that would become part of the official record. The humans never stopped being our guardians. They just needed to become something more, something that could teach us to guard ourselves. The judgment had finally been delivered, not on the civilizations that had failed to listen, but on the ancient evil that had preyed upon the galaxy for eons. And in the end, it wasn't the strong who had delivered that judgment. It was the species that had volunteered to carry the burden of watching over everyone else. Even when no one wanted to be watched over, the universe was safe. Not because humanity had saved it, but because humanity had taught it to save itself.